Good evening, everyone. My name is Andy Rikli, Superintendent of Papillion-La Vista Community Schools. Thank you so much for joining us this evening to discuss something that is critical to the district's future, and that is our bond proposal. Joining me this evening will be Brett Richards, Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations. He'll be helping answer some of the questions and going through some of the slides with me. We will keep this exactly to 60 minutes, so we'll be wrapped up by 7 p.m. this evening. The first 30 minutes of the presentation will consist of a PowerPoint presentation where we outline the proposal. The last 30 minutes, we will be taking questions and providing answers. Please remember that there is a survey embedded in the Facebook Live link, and also remember you can submit questions at any time. We won't answer them right at the outset, but we'll certainly get to them the last 30 minutes of the presentation. So with that, we'll go ahead and begin. The purpose of our presentation tonight is to really cover 3 different questions. The first question that we'd like to cover this evening is, should there be a bond issue? Bond issues ultimately help pay for facility improvements, not other things. We'll get to a little bit more of that later, and we want to make sure that our facilities continue to be on the cutting edge of the state and the country. The second issue that we want to discuss is the timing. We know that these are difficult economic times for our country and for our community. Double-digit inflation, tough job news, lots of challenges on the job front. We want to make sure that we're asking the question at the right time of our constituents. And finally, we want to go through the list of projects that we think are most critical for our community and our school district. There is a timeline that we're following, and as of right now, we are in the input gathering stage. That is, we're talking to staff members, we're talking to community members, and we're hosting events like this tonight to solicit as much feedback as we can about the proposal so that we can bring the strongest proposal to our board as possible. In December and January, we'll conduct a formal survey, which will be done by an independent agency to ask the question of our community, is this the right list? Is this the right time? We'll bring that information back to the Board of Education after winter break, along with the information from the listening sessions and our staff listening sessions, so that our board has adequate information to make an informed decision. Later this winter, we'll ask the board to make a decision on next steps with a possible vote next April or May. Several conversations have occurred prior to us getting here this evening. First and foremost, we commissioned RSP, a growth study firm out of Overland Park, Kansas, to assist us with growth projections. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. In addition, we've had lots of conversations with our Board of Education, our building principals, our staff, and our value design partners, BCDM. Based on some of that preliminary feedback, we held meetings with the impacted buildings last spring to determine which projects were most necessary and if there were any projects that we inadvertently left off the list. After collecting all of that information, the school district has landed on 3 separate priority areas. The first is school safety. We know how critical school safety is for our staff, for our students, and for our community. That's going to be the centerpiece of many of the efforts that we'll be discussing this evening. The second major priority is updating older facilities to today's standard of greatness. We have very new buildings in this school district. We also have school district buildings that are over 50 and 60 years old. We want to make sure that regardless of where your son or daughter goes to school, they attend a clean, fresh, bright, and modern facility. Finally, we want to accommodate our growing student population, particularly at the elementary level where our numbers continue to grow. The centerpiece of this bond initiative is the Safety and Security Initiative. Unfortunately, we don't need to go very far to read more news about school shootings, school violence, and things that are happening on our school campuses that none of us are comfortable with. To make sure that we're impacting all 21 buildings, we have a number of proposals to share with you this evening. We'd like to talk about updating our door access control systems. We know, for example, that we have keyless entry systems and cameras and buzzers and automated door locks, but there's more we can do to build comprehensive and unified systems. To do that, we need to have a unified network and a strong network to support all of these new devices. And finally, we've discussed with our Board of Education installing bullet-resistant film at our front entryways. In the event that a school shooter would try to force his way into our building, we would have a means of slowing that person down. Finally, we have 5 elementary buildings that we'll be discussing later that did not have the completed controlled access entry point. We would like to get that done with this proposed bond. We have a number of growth projections that we want to share with you at all 3 levels that we think provide some context for this bond. This slide shows the district's historical growth rates going back to 1990. As you can see from the slide behind me, this district has averaged approximately 2.3% growth over the last 32 years. There have been a number of points where the district's growth has started to slow, and in some cases even went backwards slightly. You'll see in 1992 as one example, and more recently in 2019-20 when the pandemic hit. We lost over 300 students, many of whom started attending home schools or private parochial schools. As you can see with the subsequent years, 2021 and 22, the enrollment is starting to climb, albeit much more slowly. This shows the growth projections that were put together by RSP Associates based out of Overland Park. This is a firm that focuses on school enrollment projections using a variety of data points, including housing starts, growth rates, traditional enrollment history through the district's past enrollment periods, so that we can determine a 5-year growth in enrollment projection. These 3 colors show the growth rates at the elementary, middle school, and high school levels. If you look closely, particularly at the middle and the high school levels, you will see that our growth rates are going to be very flat and very stable over the next 5 years. However, when you look at the elementary growth, we're going to see a significant growth from 2022, current year, to 2026, where we'll see almost 500 students grow. Finally, I'd like to share a picture of the district's current map. And from your vantage point, some of the colors in the legend may be difficult to discern. But basically what we're looking at is where the district is growing and how quickly that growth may occur. So if you can see on screen, you'll see that heavy gray line that bisects the district, which represents the high school attendance line. Above that line, you'll see a little bit of red and a little bit of orange, particularly up in the northeastern part of La Vista, where there's still room for some additional growth and development. But the vast majority of growth and development in the school district will happen to the south and the west, particularly along the Highway 370 corridor. That's where new housing starts will begin, and that's where we're going to need to continue to expand our facilities as well as look at new buildings, including new elementaries. To accommodate all of this growth, we know that we're going to have to purchase land. For example, we've already purchased land for the 17th elementary building straight east of Liberty Middle School, south of Lincoln Street. In addition, we're proposing to purchase additional land both for a new middle school, the 4th middle school, and the 18th elementary at a yet to be determined site. We know that land is a valuable commodity in this growing county, and if the need arises, we can always sell that land if the growth rates start to stall out. We also know that technology will continue to be a priority for the school district as we add more students, more teachers, and more devices. We need to have the correct infrastructure in place to support those devices. Just a reminder before I turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Brett Richards, submit your questions online and make sure that before you leave the forum tonight that you complete our survey so that your voice is heard. Now to go into a little bit more detail about some of the proposed elementary, middle school, and high school projects, Assistant Superintendent Brett Richards. Welcome, Mr. Richards.
Thank you, Dr. Rikli. Good evening, everybody. We'll start taking a look at the elementary projects here first. So we really want to get to an update of a standard at some of our older schools, Parkview, Terra, and Trumbull. That means an expansion of smaller classrooms. So some of our previous projects at G. Stanley Hall, La Vista West have seen that. Expansion of the smaller classrooms and interior renovations. So when we talk about interior renovations, we're talking about new carpet, new tile, ceiling tile, new LED lighting, painting throughout the buildings and giving it a fresh look. Infrastructure improvements with our heating and cooling systems, boilers, HVAC, roofs, windows where needed. Some of those have been replaced over the years, so the ones that are over their lifespan expectancy, we'll be replacing those. Playgrounds throughout the whole district over the next 3 to 5 years, we want to replace all the rubber resurfacing. Those are coming up and peeling back. We have a new poured rubber substance we'd like to use on that surface for safety. Looking at Terra Heights, so as you look at the maps here, we have the site plan up in the right-hand corner. We have the basic floor plan, the rest of the screen. So the green colors there will be significant renovations. That's where we're going to be coming in, knocking down some classroom walls, making those classrooms bigger. The blue area will be additions onto the buildings. So in Terra Heights, in this instance, you look at where we're going to add on to Terra Heights in 2 different places. That will allow us to add classrooms onto those blue areas to make the classrooms inside the building bigger. So we won't actually be giving more classrooms in these buildings, but just bigger classrooms throughout the elementary school. So Terra Heights in the yellow is where we're going to come in and do the upgrades, give it a fresh look like I talked about. Trumbull Park, similar here. The green areas where we're going to come in and knock out walls and make classrooms bigger. The yellow areas we'll do some upgrades with the interior, and then the blue area we're going to add on. So you see the red areas in the site plans out there, that's where we'll resurface the playgrounds. Parkview Heights, similar projects. These are some of the smallest classrooms in the building, so when we talk about an upgrade to a standard, we're talking about getting our classrooms 800 square feet or larger. A lot of these classrooms in Parkview in the green, you can kind of see are about 610 to 620 square feet. Substantially smaller than what our standard is we build to today. Parkview Heights is also a challenging site, so finding room on this site is difficult, but the architects have managed to find some space out the back to add on so we can get those bigger classrooms within the building. All these older schools need some partition work in the gym and the music room. That wall needs to be replaced as well. Other elementary projects, so these are the 5 schools that Dr. Rikli talked about with the safety and security improvements. These are the last 5 schools remaining in the district that we need to redo the front entrance through the office area. So we're gonna be able to buzz people in the front door, and then they would go immediately to their right to the office instead of coming into the hallway in the instructional area. So that'll be a major improvement, and our last 5 schools to remain to have that done. We'll also expand the kitchen and have a finishing kitchen in these 5 elementary schools. 4 of the 5. Bell already has their finishing kitchen, but that'll be the last of the finishing kitchens in the district as well. And then we also, these schools are getting close to 20 years old or older and are needing interior updates as well, including lighting, flooring, ceiling tiles, those types of things. So as we look at Hickory Hill, this is the sister school of Anderson Grove. So we did do this project in the 2018 bond, exactly the same project as Anderson Grove got. So you can see the blue area, we're adding on a finishing kitchen there, front office entry, and then the green areas, we're doing some significant renovation there, knocking out some walls and repurposing space, and then the yellow areas we're just upgrading. Walnut Creek, this will be the first of the prototype schools that I'm talking about. So this floor plan or blueprint was built first at Rumsey Station, and that project right now is ongoing at Rumsey Station. This exact same one you see on your screen that we're doing at Walnut Creek. So we're adding 1,500 square feet onto the front. That'll give us an extra kindergarten room. Out the back we'll do a finishing kitchen, and then we're going to repurpose the old kindergarten room and special education space where the old office is, and move the office into that space, and it'll be a reconfigured front entrance. You'll see this pattern in the next couple of slides here at our prototype schools. So portal, same floor plan, same exact projects that I just talked about that are going to be done at Portal. Patriot already has that extra kindergarten room out front, so we won't need to add on the front end, but we will put the finishing kitchen on the back. And then repurpose space in the green and the special ed areas and the office areas and the serving areas of the kitchen. Bell Elementary already has the finishing kitchen and the kindergarten classroom out front, so we'll just be basically renovating space between the special education classrooms and the office areas. Middle school projects, a lot of the same here as we talked about on the older schools of the elementary that we want to do at our 2 middle schools that are La Vista Middle and Papillia Middle. Liberty Middle, of course, is brand new and getting the addition from the 2018 bond. So in these middle school projects, we'll look to do science room renovations, a lot of cabinetry, learning lab space within those science rooms, reconfiguring learning center spaces, interior renovations throughout the buildings, giving that a fresh update look, and infrastructure improvements were needed, which include the roof, the windows, HVACs, and boilers. Track stadium updates. Tracks typically in the athletic track we're talking about outside last about 20 years. These are both over 30 years old, and the infrastructure underneath those tracks have have started to crumble. So resurfacing and those types of things don't work on those tracks anymore. So we will kind of redo the whole track system, and that should give us another 20 plus years at both of these sites. And then we need a dedicated counseling center at La Vista Middle School. It's the only middle school in the district that doesn't have a dedicated space. So as we look at that blueprint floor plan with La Vista Middle, you can see the red areas on the site plan or the site work we're going to look to do, which covers the track. We also want to add a set of bleachers at La Vista Middle because we think that's a spot where there's not a lot of ability to watch events at that stadium because of the deep slant that goes down the hill at La Vista Middle. So adding bleachers there was necessary for both safety and convenience for parents. We'll also have some sidewalk work around the site plan in this due to fire codes. As we look inside the building, you can see the green area, the science labs we want to significantly renovate. The learning center spaces in the green significantly renovate. And then the addition out the back for the counseling center, and then the yellow will upgrade where we haven't touched that in quite a few years. Papillion Middle School, similar proposal here. The track you can see in the site plan. There we already have 2 sets of bleachers out of Papillion Middle. We'll come inside the building and get after the science labs and then update wherever it hasn't been updated in the last several years. And then the gym area and the boys and girls locker room area at the Papillion Middle haven't been done in decades, and those are areas that we want to get to as part of this proposal. We'll remind you to please submit your questions online throughout this, and Dr. Rikli and I will try to answer some of those after the presentation. Looking at high school projects now, the high schools were a big part of the last bond proposal. So this one, we just want to come back and finish some things up. At the high schools, it's only about 10% of the proposal that we're talking about. So we're talking about renovating the fine arts and auditoriums. The ADA compliance issues we have over at Monarch. We have restrooms that are not accessible for wheelchairs, as an example. We want to get in there and replace the stage floors at both auditoriums. Seating replacement at Monarch. Now, Papillion La Vista South High School has excellent seats and carpet in that area, so we won't be touching those. Sound and lighting enhancements in both auditoriums are needed, and then storage space within our fine arts programs are needed. PE and activity space at Monarch. We feel like we have 2 things here we're looking to do: a flex classroom space at Titan and the PE activity space at Monarch. Both sets of students at each high school are missing out on some great things happening. So for example, over at Monarch, we just put in a second flex classroom, and then they don't have the turf space. Where Titan only has 1 flex classroom, so we need to get the turf or another flex classroom over to Titan. So we think that kids will definitely benefit from both of those added spaces. We're already seeing that at both high schools within the spaces that they do have. And then lastly, we want to update the baseball and softball complexes. We're working with the city Papillion for Fricke Field and the city field at La Vista Park with the city of La Vista to try to get the scope of those projects settled in on. So whatever we do for the Monarchs, we're going to do for the Titans. Whatever we do for the Titans, we're going to do for the Monarchs. And vice versa, whatever we do for baseball, we're going to do for softball. And we want to make that right at both of those complexes. Papillion La Vista High School, so you can see the blueprint here. Adding that turf center off the north side of their competition gym seems to make sense. Now with this turf space, we're talking about 6,500 square feet. So at Titan, from where their turf space starts, from their weight room, all the way to the back wall, that's 6,500 square feet. So we want to put that exact amount of square footage over at Monarch. And then we have the auditorium that's going to need extensive renovation at Monarch, and then added a storage space as well. Papillion La Vista South High School, you can kind of see the green in the auditorium, mostly stage floor replacement, sound and lighting enhancements, and storage in that area. And then you can see off to the south side of the building, next to their auxiliary gym, that we propose putting in their flex classroom. And there you can see kind of a map of the non-instructional space we're talking about between the Titan baseball and softball stadium and the stadiums that we use for baseball and softball with the cities of Papillion and La Vista. And then lastly, the Young Adult Transition Program. This is a special education program for students in 18 to 21 years old. Currently releasing a storefront over by a Head Start program. And it's about 6,600 square feet, and we've just outgrown it. So we currently outsource some students. We have over 40 students in this. A lot of them are in wheelchairs, and we have a lot of staff that work with those students, so we've kind of run out of that space there. So we're proposing a new space, and this will take an amendment with the City of Papillion to get done, to use this space for this program. So you can kind of see the back or the west of Liberty Middle School. A space that we have land already that we own as a district that we would try to add that building, about a 10,000 square foot building for that program. Finances, always an important part of the discussion. We think with the bond set up the way we've had over the years within the district, we have one going off from our last finances of about 2002. Our last payment on that's December of 2022 this year. So we think we can do this without a tax levy increase. The estimated cost for all these projects, we're talking about $87 million of elementary school projects within this proposal. Middle school, about $21.2 million. High school projects, again, $13 million, about 10% of all the projects that we're talking about here. New land, $5.7 million. And then technology infrastructure, which a lot of that cost is built into our projects as well, but an additional $1 million for infrastructure. And then the YAP building program project out back of Liberty, about $5 million. So a total cost of almost $130 million with escalating costs in construction and those types of things. This seems to be a pretty good amount that we want to propose. Just a reminder, bond funds can only be used for construction costs and equipment and furniture within these projects. So we can't use bond funds for staff salaries or anything of that nature. With that being said, I'm going to bring Dr. Rikli back in, and we will start to answer some of your questions as our communications team feeds us some questions. Please provide your feedback at the information on the screen as well, and we'll get to some questions here.
Thank you very much, Brett. And I know we've got a number of questions that have come in. We're actually a little bit above schedule. We thought this would take us about 30 minutes, but Brett and I are like a well-oiled machine, so that provides extra time for questions. I did want to highlight one thing that Brett said at the end that directly addresses at least one of the questions I saw as I was monitoring off stage, and that is, how can you possibly keep the tax levy the same if you're adding $130 million to our potential debt load? And the answer, if you didn't hear Mr. Richards say it very clearly, is we try to stagger our bonds in such a way that before we ask for a new bond, such as this one, $129.9 million, we want to make sure there's another bond that's being retired. That debt is coming off our books. So as a large amount of debt is coming off the district's books, we're proposing to replace it with this new proposal of $139 million worth of projects. So very important question. Thank you for submitting that online. And with that, I'll turn it over to our communications department to start providing us some other questions that have come in.
I think one of the follow-up questions to that, Dr. Rikli, has been, if this doesn't pass, will the taxes go down?
The short answer is yes. So if for some reason the community or the board decides this isn't the right time, it's not the right bond, or we ask for it and it would fail, then the old debt that was retiring and coming off the books, and if it's not replaced by new debt, the marginal tax rate actually would go down. That is correct. Thank you for the question.
Tom has lots of questions about school safety. Can you explain a little bit more in detail about what safety and security initiatives are included in this proposal?
Absolutely. I'll take a stab at it, and then if Mr. Richards has some things to add, he can certainly do so. A few of these things I touched on briefly at the beginning of the presentation, but since we have some time, I think it's worth digging in a little bit deeper. First and foremost, there's going to be some facility issues that we need to take care of. There were 5 buildings that we presented at the beginning of the presentation that do not have controlled access entryways. 21 buildings, 16 of them have it, 5 do not. And if you're not familiar with the concept of a controlled access entryway, basically it consists of a buzzer and a camera to get into a vestibule. You're then routed into the main office where we can verify your identity, sign you in, see what you're there for, and then release you past the second set of doors into the instructional area. That's what 16 of the 21 buildings have. That's what we're trying to accomplish with this bond, is get the other 5 buildings, they're all elementary buildings, fixed with this safety proposal. But there's other things that don't necessarily directly involve our facilities. For example, we've talked about having more access points to our building that are controlled electronically through our digital badging system. We have some of that now. We want to make that more robust moving forward. We also know that some of our access points and the software running behind the scenes, it's getting a little bit dated, and we need to make sure that that's upgraded. Along with that, we're also looking at automated door sensors and door locks. We know, for example, that door propping, keeping doors propped open is an issue in all 21 of our buildings. It happens every single day. And we're certainly better at it today than we were even a year or 2 ago, but we're quite confident it still happens from time to time. We're looking at software and hardware solutions that will allow us to centrally monitor our doors and to lock them down remotely so that we can make sure that our staff and our students are kept as safe as possible. We talked about a few other things. We talked about the bullet-resistant film. A couple of the other things that we didn't necessarily talk about that have come up in other listening sessions include fencing, particularly at the elementary levels. We've talked about additional SROs, particularly at the elementary level, school resource officers. We have them at our 3 middle schools and our 2 high schools, but they're not necessarily a part of our 16 elementary buildings. So there's a variety of things that we've looked at with safety and security, but the truth of the matter is we really want and need your feedback in this area, because we think safety and security is at the very centerpiece of this conversation. And while we've generated some ideas that we feel good about, I'm equally confident that our parents and our community members have some ideas that perhaps we haven't even considered. So thank you for the question. Mr. Richards, is there anything that I'm leaving off on safety?
No, I think you hit on all those, Dr. Rikli. The only thing I would just want to emphasize what Dr. Rikli said about giving us your feedback, because that's what we've been doing for the past 6 weeks or so, is getting feedback on this area to take back to our Board of Education to discuss the safety and security items that need to be in part of this proposal. So keep that feedback coming. That'll help us with our discussions and final proposal.
So Robert had a question about details about what we're doing to expand the fine arts program, and is what's included in this proposal enough given the number of students that we have participating in fine arts activities?
That's a great question, Robert. So in terms of what's in the proposal right now, at both high schools, Monarch and Titan, we're proposing really an overhaul of the auditoriums. And Monarch is in particular need. It's an older facility. If you haven't been in it recently, there are some ADA and some compliance issues. We know part of that renovation is going to need to consist of stage floor, lighting, sound systems. In the case of Monarch, we're going to need to look at updating some of their seating. It's getting very old. So the auditoriums tend to be the centerpiece for some, not all, but some of our performing arts. So we want to make sure we're investing in those 2 areas at both high schools. In addition, when Mr. Richards was walking you through the diagrams of the 2 buildings, you'd see additional storage space. So each high school will receive dedicated storage space for the fine and performing arts. We've gotten more than a little bit of feedback from both staff and constituents that that's great. It's a nice starting point, but it's not nearly enough. And I suspect that's probably true, just like it is at home, where there's never enough storage space, right? You never have enough closets. You never have enough space in the basement. You're always going to fill what you have. It's not really that different with a school district. So we want to make sure that besides the auditorium renovations, which are significant, that we're adequately addressing the storage needs of band, vocal music, instrumental music, and all of our other fine and performing arts that we're so very proud of. Mr. Richards, anything else on the auditorium renovation?
No, that sounds like a pretty comprehensive list there, Dr. Rikli.
As a follow-up to the fine arts question, Jeannie's wondering if there were ADA issues, how have they not already been addressed?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm not an expert into ADA law, and maybe Mr. Richards can throw me a lifeline here, but as a general rule, the law is triggered when you're doing significant renovation. There are buildings all across this great country of ours that are not ADA compliant, and the reason being because they have been grandfathered in, meaning they are old, they passed, they were built prior to the passage of ADA, which I believe was 1990. And if you're an older building, sometimes you're grandfathered in, and both, particularly Monarch is a building that certainly predates the passage of the law in the early 90s. Monarch was built in the early 1970s. But what is contingent for the school district is that if we're going to go in and renovate a space or add additional space, that we need to make sure that we're in compliance with the law. But the bigger issue really isn't whether we're in compliance with the law or not. It's the right thing to do, right? So if we have a building that we're aware of that has compliance issues that limits our students, our families, our community members from fully accessing that space, then we need to fix it, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Mr. Richards, is there anything I missed?
I think you hit that right on. We do have a representative from our architect company here tonight, BCDM, that kind of tracks that. Is there anything else, Pat, you think we missed on that question?
No, I think.
So we'll get him to kind of respond to that as well, because our architects kind of help guide us through these compliance issues or building needs within the ADA law. So I'll let Pat.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that you guys have outlined. I would also point out that a building as large, at roughly 300,000 square feet as Monarch, there are lots of areas of the building, and there are ADA compliant areas everywhere throughout the building. There's a few little nuggets that we're picking up and cleaning up, but generally what you've outlined is correct.
Great.
Thank you for being here tonight, Pat.
Kim is wondering, why is the YATP program being proposed at the middle school campus instead of being tied to one of the high school campuses?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Kim. So I think the assumption is that because these are 18 to 21-year-old students, that it would make sense to have them located in proximity to our high schools. But the fact of the matter is the YATP, the Young Adult Transition Program, it focuses really on life skills, job skills, and employability skills. Things that aren't necessarily, they're going to have exposure to at the main campus. So the way the program is currently structured is that students are very frequently in the current location, and then they're spending part of the time at that location working on life skills, cooking, cleaning, maintaining an apartment type of an environment. But they're also going out to work sites and learning employability skills. We have approximately 10 students, for example, that are currently at La Vista Embassy Suites, great business partner, and they're learning skills, everything from housekeeping to foods to behind-the-scenes mechanical work. So the work that they're doing at YATP really is more community-based and job-focused than it is things happening at the high school. So then our question was, where do we have some space available to put this program? Monarch wouldn't be a good choice because it's largely a landlocked campus. Titan would be a decent choice because we do have a little bit, we have additional space down there that needs to be fully built out. But Liberty Middle School, we purchased a parcel of land that was more than big enough, not only for that middle school and future expansion, but for ancillary programs such as this one. So we won't have to purchase additional land. It'll be right in the heart of the district and right there on Highway 370, which we think is really important as kids are going out to job sites and doing some of those other things in the community. So really important question.
We have a handful of questions about the third high school. First of all, Melissa's wondering, when is the plan for the third high school to be built?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Melissa. And the short answer is we don't know. We can project based on current growth rates and what we think may happen with our community and future growth, but anything beyond a 5-year projection gets to be a little bit flaky. So going back to the RSP enrollment study, if you have access to those slides that we shared earlier, you'll see both the middle school and the high school growth rates are pretty stable. You're not going to see a lot of growth the next 3 to 5 years. The elementary continues to grow, however. So given that reality, we're probably not going to need that building yet. The other factor that I think it's important for our community to remember is we did significant expansion at both Monarch and Titan as part of the last bond. We added approximately 20 classrooms to Titan, we added approximately 20 classrooms to Monarch. That will allow both high schools to grow from their current capacity of roughly 2,000 students to approximately 2,400 students. So that alone probably buys us 5 to 10 years. I think it's also important for our community to know, thanks to you as our taxpayers and our board, they had the foresight to purchase the land as part of the 2018 bond initiative. So typically to build a Class A high school, you want a parcel of land at least 80 acres or more. We purchased approximately 85. If you weren't aware, we purchased that land just south of Highway 370 and 72nd Street. It's basically south of Cobalt Credit Union. If you don't want the marching band blaring horns in your ear on a Saturday morning, you may or may not want to purchase property adjacent to that, but there's your fair warning. So we have the land, we have a plan, we have 2 high schools with capacity. So I think the next step then is to see how those growth rates across the county and across the school district play out. But if I had to venture a guess, I would say we're minimally 5 years and probably 10 years before we're reconsidering that 3rd high school.
I would also add there, Dr. Rikli, just the district's done a great job of staying ahead of that, making sure that they're looking at the overall projections of full grow out. This is about 27 square miles of land within the school district, and developers are heavily after it. And you know, if we're not actively trying to buy the bigger parcels of land for our secondary schools for the future, the developers will have it, and then we're going to be caught without that piece of land in the future. So that's why that land was bought early, the high school, and that's why in this proposal we're looking to buy a larger piece of land for the 4th middle school.
I think one last consideration for our taxpayers is a Class A high school is incredibly expensive. When we priced out Class A high school, when we did our high school visioning several years ago, building a basic Class A high school was about $80 million, and that didn't include a swimming pool and some of the amenities you see in a lot of Class A campuses. If you would look at the cost of building a Class A high school today, it's about $130 million. So that's inflation, that's the escalating costs of construction costs that Mr. Richards referenced earlier. We don't want to ask our taxpayers for a $130 million investment until we're absolutely net sure that that's something that we need, and the enrollment right now just isn't quite there. But thank you for the question.
As a follow-up to that, Kelly was wondering if we're not using the land for the 3rd high school, can it be sold to help fund this bond issue?
Yeah, hypothetically, could we turn around and sell that land that we purchased? We could, but I'll go back to something Mr. Richards had said. When you look at how fast this county is growing and how rare, frankly, parcels of land like that are currently, much less 5 to 10 years from now, in my opinion, it would be really short-sighted for us to turn around and sell that land, because heaven forbid we get 5 to 10 years down the road, we need to start looking for that land again, and we can't find it. We're going to have a really upset community saying, what were you thinking? You knew the county was growing. You knew that these parcels of land were going to be increasingly difficult to source, and you sold it. So I would be very surprised if we sold the land that we're sitting on. We certainly have the option of doing that, and if the board determines that's something that would be prudent, or if our growth rate starts to slow, that would certainly be a conversation we could have with the community. But if I were a betting person, I would say we won't be in the business of selling that parcel anytime soon.
Dan also had a question about high school, but his was about the numbers. He was trying to understand the number of high school students we had during the 2018 bond issue up to 22 compared to the number of high school students we have now. Is it fewer or is it greater number of students that we have now?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Dan. So our high school numbers have stayed very stable the last 2 years. And you really have at least 2 factors at play there. One, we graduated at both high schools very large senior classes, and they were replaced by freshman classes that weren't quite as large. So it's basic arithmetic. But the other factor that we have at play with our 2 high schools is the pandemic. And going back to the slide that shows the district's enrollment actually going down slightly, we know that during the pandemic, some parents pulled their kids, sent them to private schools, parochial schools, homeschooled, never brought them back. So the high school numbers have started to recover. Both Monarch and Titan are sitting at approximately 1,900 students. Titan is slightly larger. The last time I looked, there are about 50 more students than Monarch, but they're very, very close in terms of numbers. And those numbers haven't increased significantly in the last couple of years. We think now that we're out of the pandemic and our enrollment is starting to stabilize, that those numbers will start climbing again, but for the time being, we're still pretty close to the numbers that we saw a couple of years ago.
Reggie asked if you could explain how doing the same at each high school, such as the flex rooms and activity rooms or turfing all the fields, is being good stewards. The improvements must be based on proven need. Is there a need for these facilities?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Reggie. And wants versus needs, that's really at the heart of all of these conversations. What makes the conversations kind of difficult is what I may consider a want may be different than what you consider a want, and then I would apply that same logic to needs. Wants and needs are in the eye of the beholder, I would argue. What we try to do in this school district, and it predates me and it's probably going to be the case long after I'm gone, is providing opportunities for kids. And we'll never have equal, the same, at any of our buildings. You look at our 16 elementary buildings, from some of our oldest to our brand newest, they will never be exactly the same. And I'm not sure we want them exactly the same for a variety of reasons. 3 middle schools, you look at La Vista Middle School, Papillion Middle School, Liberty Middle School, they are not the same and they'll never be identical. And the high schools, same. You've got Papillion La Vista High, built in 1971, it's 50 years old. It's fundamentally a different look and feel than Papillion La Vista South, which opened up in 2003. There will always be structural differences, for example, in those buildings, and that's okay. We can embrace that. But what we can't accept is unequal programs and unequal opportunities for our students. And what we have found, for example, with the turf room, the PE classroom at Papillion La Vista South, is it has created opportunities for kids. It was originally built to serve the NJROTC program. That's a program that South has. It serves Monarch students, but it's heavier with South students than Monarch students. So it's doing a wonderful job for a space for NJROTC, and it's created other opportunities for athletes, for people in flags, dance, conditioning, weights, and we want to have those same opportunities for our Monarch students. Likewise, Monarch has some flex spaces built as part of the 2018 bond that have likewise created opportunities for Monarch students in the area of academies, sports training, athletics, activities. They are really cool spaces that Monarch students have access to that Titan students don't. So it's not really, from my vantage point, about equal is equal, same is the same, must be identical, because we will never be identical. However, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that kids have opportunities at both buildings that look and feel very, very similar. Brett, am I missing anything there?
Yeah, I would just add on too that, we want to get our kids the best, whether that compete in the classroom for future college scholarships or get one of the best educations in the state of Nebraska. I think we try to do that for our extracurriculars too. And when our kids in the softball and baseball area, the drainage isn't working and we're getting kicked off the fields because of rain, we're having to go compete at other people's sites because our fields aren't ready because the drainage isn't very good. And we see, a lot of the metro schools have gone to some artificial turf in baseball and softball. That's made a difference in those areas for maintenance and for their kids to be able to practice and compete in all their games, even in severe weather, which we typically get around here in spring and fall. So that's something we're looking at. I'm not saying we're going down that direction yet, turfing the baseball and softball fields. Gretna has those already, Bellevue West, Ralston's putting those in with their bond that they just finished up, and it's something we want to look at as a district and take a look at, see if that's a solution or not.
Thanks, Brett.
Let's switch to some elementary questions. Jill had talked about our support of increasing the class size at Parkview Heights. Can you explain a little bit about what exactly academically are the benefits of increasing the physical size of the classroom?
Yeah, we know that instruction in 2022 looks different than it did in the 1950s and the 1960s when some of our buildings were built. And Parkview is one of perhaps the worst examples of buildings that have really undersized classrooms. There's other buildings that have smaller classrooms as well. But when Assistant Superintendent Siri took me on a tour not too long ago and had me count the number of desks and looked at how cramped some of those intermediate classrooms were at Parkview Heights, I think it was very clear in my mind we don't have the physical space to do what we want to do instructionally. An example that Shireen often gives is in reading groups, for example, where we do grouping and regrouping and working with small groups of students. That requires additional space. Gone are the days, for the most part, where you had a teacher at the front of the classroom and 22 students sitting in front of them in neat little rows. That model, for the most part, doesn't exist anymore, and with good reason. I think when you look at some of our teaching strategies and methodologies and ways of grouping and regrouping students to make sure that those students' needs are being met academically, the truth is it takes more space. And if you'd walk into one of those buildings like Parkview Heights that have some of the smaller spaces, you'd see in some cases students out in the hallway, students working with paras in small annex rooms away from other kids. And that's just not okay, particularly when you look at some of our newer buildings where they have 150 to 200 additional square feet in a classroom to carry out those instructional strategies that other buildings just don't have access to. So we really believe very strongly that some of our older buildings need to have that same access to square footage that our newer classrooms have.
Sticking with some elementary questions, Lou had a question about finishing kitchens. Exactly which schools are benefiting from the finishing kitchen and what exactly does that include?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that, and then Mr. Richards is the expert here. So we have 4 buildings that do not have finishing kitchens, all elementary buildings. And a finishing kitchen is, as its name implies, it's not a scratch cooking kitchen where you are cooking meals from scratch, but you are taking meals that have been pre-prepared, putting the finishing touches on them, and then serving them to our students. So that's one benefit of having the finishing kitchen. You get an extra entree, which our kids really enjoy and most of our parents appreciate as well, having extra choices by having that finishing kitchen. And for those 4 buildings that do not have a finishing kitchen, because of the nature of the dishwashers and the support equipment that they have there, you're using styrofoam plates instead of the hard plastic. You're using the throwaway plastic utensils instead of the metal. So it really gets to be a waste and a sustainability issue too, that our finishing kitchens allow more food choices for our kids and less waste in the form of the consumable materials we're using. But Mr. Richards, any other thoughts on the finishing kitchen?
Yeah, the food, you hit it right on the head. The food choices are the big one. And the schools that have those finishing kitchens have enjoyed that extra food choice for their elementary kids and can tell you how important that probably is for our students and what they eat.
Lunch is pretty important to most of our kids. Maybe you've heard that if you're a parent. So we're very excited to offer that third choice with the finishing kitchen.
Jim had a question about the timing of construction, and is there a way that you can do construction over the summer months so it avoids the disruption during the school year?
Yeah, again, Mr. Richards will have some thoughts on this. When we're doing heavy renovation or new construction or additions to buildings, we really try to piggyback onto the summer months as much as possible. But when there's extensive renovation, you just can't get it done in 2.5 months, and we all know that the summer gets shorter and shorter every year. So trying to shoehorn all of that work into a 2.5-month window, it's impossible. But we do try. We do our very best to try. So I'll kind of walk through what I think may happen if the community is gracious enough to support this bond. If it passes in May, we're probably not doing a ton of heavy lifting next summer. So that would be the summer of 2023. We would probably start some of the bigger work that following fall of 2023. And because this is a large bond, it includes a number of buildings, at least 12 buildings plus YATP, the board would want to stage and stagger the projects. In other words, you don't do all $130 million worth of work in year one. You start to prioritize what projects are most urgent, which ones are most pressing, and you prioritize. And then you start with those projects, and then you start working your way through. Typically 5 years is how much time it takes to stage the projects, prioritize the projects, and bring them to completion. And that's really where we are with the 2018 bond as we bring that to conclusion. But Mr. Richards, am I getting the timeline okay?
Yeah, it becomes difficult when you have an 18-month project, for example, at an elementary school, and then trying to fit that into 3 months, or spreading it out to where you do one summer and then just totally pack up and try to come back the next summer. It's just not financially feasible for a company to bid it that way. It saves us money by doing it the way we've been doing it. There are some things we're looking at timeline-wise and within those schools that we can definitely try to keep the learning environment to a minimally disruptive, to be minimally disrupted. So, we met with our architects last week and started to have some of those conversations already with some ideas we may have there. But it is difficult. I mean, we've been part of many summer projects, and trying to get as much in the summer as we possibly can, especially during these COVID times, was difficult. But we're hoping we can make some progress with that. And over time, you know, with these elementary projects, get a little better pattern to what we're doing during the school year as well. Keep the stuff outside during the school year and have it mostly outside during the school year, and then we have what we call a summer slam for those 2.5, 3 months where we really get in there and get some things done while the kids aren't there.
Jessica hit on a hot topic for many parents. Why are parents and PTOs continually asked to do fundraisers if we're going to continue to pass bond issues?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Jessica. We get this a lot in relation to the fundraising that our foundation does. We also get it in relation to what PTOs do. I would have a couple of thoughts to offer. One, our philosophy has been, it is our job as a school district to provide a base education, an outstanding education, but a base education. And then if there's things that we want to do to enhance that experience, that's when we'll sometimes reach out to the foundation, for example, and they're a wonderful partner, to our PTOs, for example, and to outside business partners through grants and other opportunities that they have to get involved with our school district. I guess the metaphor that I often use with PTOs is it's our job to bake the cake. What we often ask our PTOs and our foundations is to frost it and put the cherry on top. It really is a philosophical discussion. There are school districts across this great country of ours that don't have active PTOs, PTAs, PTNs. We do, and we're blessed to have that. And by doing the work that they do with fundraisers, with booster-thons, with fun runs, things of that nature, frankly, they allow us to do some things that we may not have the ability to do otherwise. And in other cases, they're doing things with playgrounds, for example, that take the burden off our taxpayers by building playgrounds, by doing rubber surfaces, by doing those little extra things to make a really great experience for our kids. So it's a great question, and it's one that we're always trying to find that balance between what are we supposed to provide as a school district funded by taxpayer dollars versus what types of opportunities should we be partnering on with our PTOs, our foundation, and our business partners.
There were several questions about turf. If you can explain, Stacy wanted to know what exactly is included in this proposal for turf. Does that include baseball fields or not, and what other turf activities are in this proposal?
Mr. Richards, you want to take a stab at that one?
What we have within the proposal is probably the maximum that we'd like to see done at the baseball and softball fields. So if the board decides to take that back to where we don't do turf, then we'll have some extra. We can lower the proposal or whatever that means. So right now within the proposal, yes, we have artificial turf there for baseball fields and softball fields for Monarch and Titan at this particular time.
What makes it a little bit challenging for us is that 2 of the 4 facilities that we're looking at aren't owned by the district. Papillion La Vista South baseball and softball, those are on district property. We can modify those any way that our community supports. Baseball at Fricke Field is owned by the City of Papillion. Softball complex, City Fields are owned by the City of La Vista. So we're working closely with Mayor Kindig La Vista, Mayor Black, City of Papillion to make sure that we're not getting too far ahead of their plans and City Council. But what Brett and I have said very clearly to previous community groups is what we do for the boys, we will do for the girls. What we do for Monarch, we will do at Titan. We have no interest whatsoever in creating disparities between girls sports, boys sports, or north versus south. We know that's not healthy for kids. We know that's not healthy for the school district.
Jenny had a follow-up question to that, and that what is the long-term sustainability of turf and the cost of maintaining that turf? Is that something that will have to be fundraised over time, or what's the plan for replacing that? Yeah,
we would, they're usually 10 to 12 years of life with the artificial turf. The initial cost is about double of what it is cost to replace it later. So you put in some initial investment, and then when you have to replace it, let's say a dozen years later, it's about half the cost at that particular time. So we plan for those things within our special building fund or our depreciation fund to be able to replace those things and not have to go out for a bond to do that. It's similar as the foundation field or Monarch's turf field over there too as well. So we plan for those things for the long term within those two different funds, so we don't anticipate having to ask taxpayers to pay for them again through another bond. Now, but through our general fund, we can transfer them over to depreciation or take it out of our special building fund to replace.
Dennis had a question about the timing of the bond issue. Is this the best time to do it? Maybe it should wait another year. And then Stephanie had a follow-up question to that is, what does the impact of today's interest rates have on doing a bond issue right now?
Yeah, two great questions. So I'll take Dennis's question first. Is this the best time? I guess my response to that, Dennis, would be that's why we're having this conversation. I think if we hear overwhelmingly from our community, from our taxpayers, from our parents that, Andy, this isn't the right time. Times are tough economically. We need to punt 6 months, 12 months, or whatever. That's exactly the reason why we're having this conversation, so that we can have a better sense of, is this something that is palatable to our taxpayers? And if so, great, we'll proceed. And if it's not, then we will talk about what Plan B might look like. The follow-up question on interest rates, that's a really good question. And my crystal ball gets a little hazy. I don't know about Mr. Richards here. The Federal Reserve has indicated that there's probably at least one more interest rate hike coming. We talked about another quarter point. We know what's happened with mortgage rates, 30-year notes hovering at greater than 7%. Money is expensive right now. One might make the argument that because of the economic conditions, it's worth waiting. One could also make the argument, though, is that interest rates could just as likely go up as they go down, right? None of us can predict what future market conditions may emerge. Here's what I'm very confident of, though. There is a cost to waiting associated with construction costs. We have seen certain building materials come down in the last few months. Lumber, for example, skyrocketed and starting to fall back to earth. But we don't build buildings with a lot of lumber. We're mainly using steel and concrete. And the costs of steel and concrete continue to remain very high. One of the things we know about building costs, whether it's a residential home or a Class A high school, is that once prices reach a certain level, a certain floor, they usually don't come down very much. And in fact, I think Mr. Richards had mentioned that when we originally started to provide some estimates on the costs associated with this list, it was hovering around $100 million. Well, you look at the list now, because of supply chain issues, because of inflation, because of skyrocketing costs associated with labor and materials, that's now $130 million. Is it reasonable to think that if we waited another year or two, that number could skyrocket even more? Yeah, I think that's a reasonable assumption. Is it reasonable to assume that the numbers are going to come crashing back down? I don't think that's very likely, but again, some of this is just based on pure speculation, so we're doing our best to play the odds. But Brett, any follow-up to that?
Yeah, I guess one good thing right now is the bond interest rates have not been as high as mortgage rates, so that's good news. And then if they do get up there a little bit with the interest rates, the board would have a chance to refinance just like you would your house after 5 years and try to get those rates down, which they've done several times in the last decade on their existing bonds, which is just smart business from our board. And you can get those rates down as low as the market goes once it hits that 5-year mark.
Yeah, great question, thank you. We have time for probably one, maybe two more questions.
Well, Vicki has a question. There were a few other questions about just efficiencies. Will the HVAC system and increase efficiencies, and what about like LED lighting and some of those?
Oh, it's a great question. Brett, would you mind taking that one?
Sure. I'd start with the LED lighting, and the LED lighting does help with efficiencies and energy costs, and it also provides a brighter room for learning environments. So that's the one thing with LED. We've started to do that at some of our schools. Of course, it's a fairly expensive process pulling out, doing it all at once. So this bond would help with that. As far as the HVAC side, absolutely. The units that are built today are a lot more energy efficient than the ones of the past. They also bring in fresher and cleaner air into the learning environment. So those are the two things that we would get from this particular bond with the HVAC systems replacement.
We'd also be looking at control units, which can generate efficiencies, and I would also add that on new construction, not necessarily renovation, the district's in the habit of building new construction with geothermal loops. I think we have approximately 6 of them. It's our newer buildings. Geothermal loops are very expensive to install, but they pay for themselves through efficiencies over the life of the unit, so that's something else we'd be taking a look at. Time for one more, Ms. Iman?
Sure, there was one last question about the pool. And what are the plans with the pool, and is it possible that a pool could support 2 or 3 high schools?
It wouldn't be a bond conversation without a question about the pool, so thank you very much. We most recently talked about the pool in 2018. It has come up several times during this most recent bond conversation. It doesn't appear to be a concept that's broadly supported. I won't say that we won't get there, but as of right now, that doesn't appear to be a top 3, top 5 priority with our community, though that could change. A big part of the reason why it fell out of favor after the last bond, in my experience, it was a combination of cost and how many student lives it was impacting. So the cost first. When we bid it out back in 2018, a 7-lane pool was approximately $7 million. We haven't updated that cost estimate, but given the cost of labor, materials, construction costs, I think it's reasonable to assume it's at least 50% more than that. So I would say a conservative estimate would probably be $10 million. The second piece of the equation is how many students are participating. And the last time I looked at our numbers, boys, girls swimming, boys, girls diving, we have less than 100 students. So when you look at the operational cost of not only installing a pool, but then some of the other costs associated with the pool, the heating, the water, the chemicals, the supervision, you have to have a licensed pool operator supervising the pool, and the pool is not part of our curriculum. In some school districts, I believe Ralston, for example, swimming is still part of their curriculum. It's not part of our curriculum. So it really does come down to, at least by my way of thinking, is our community willing to make a $10 million capital construction outlay that's only going to impact 70 to 80 students, plus the operational costs over time. So for me, I love swimming. It's a lifelong sport. I love the program that we have, but I also try to balance that against the needs and wants of our taxpayers.
There are more questions coming in, and we will continue to answer those online over the next couple days.
Outstanding. Thanks, Ms. Iman. So before you sign off, don't forget to fill out that survey that's embedded in the link. Thank you so much for everything that you do to support this community and this school district. We are very proud to serve, and we are really grateful for you participating tonight. Have a good evening.